Hi, my name is Angel. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing my November wrap-up, which is going to be a little bit weird because I feel like November was just a weird month for me. I read a lot of things that I don't typically read a lot of, and I was also kind of in, I don't know if you call it a reading slump or just like a life slump, but things got a little bit weird towards the end, and there were many days where I just didn't read at all, which is very unusual for me. But we are here to talk about the 18 books that I read in November. Technically it's 18, arguably you could call it 13, but we'll get to that in a second. However, I did read 18 different things in November, so we're going to talk about those. So I'm going to start off talking about the books that I read in videos, because if you guys have watched those vlogs, then this might get a little repetitive. So I'm not going to go super in depth, but I will link the vlogs down below that I talk about. So the first one was my fantasy vlog. I tried fantasy out for the first time, and I read 3 books for this video. I read A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas, which I gave 4.5 stars. I absolutely loved it, way more than I thought I would. I actually am currently reading the second one, and I'm just like bringing back all that love and the feelings that I felt reading the first one, and I never thought that I would be saying that about this book. Then I read For the Wolf by Hannah Whitten in that video. I gave that one a 3.5. That was the first one that I read for that video, so my first ever real fantasy book, and I really enjoyed it. It was a dark fantasy, which I think was a good choice for me to read because I read a lot of dark fiction and horror. So now I know when I look for new fantasy books to read in the future, I do kind of like that darker fantasy vibe to it. And lastly, for fantasy, in November, I read Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. I have seen this book everywhere. The third book just recently came out. This is a very well-loved trilogy, well-loved author, well-loved first book. For me, it fell totally flat. I gave it 2 stars. I talked about all my feelings in my fantasy vlog. I included some spoilers if you are interested in that, but there is a non-spoiler review section where I talk about that book and all 3 of these. So once again, that video will be linked down below if you want to see like my in-depth thoughts as I went through the process of reading fantasy for the first time and reading these books specifically. Overall, it was a really fun time. It definitely made me way less intimidated to read fantasy in the future. I used to be super scared. I don't know why. I just used to feel like it would be too much for my brain to comprehend, but I'm really glad that I enjoyed it and am now less afraid to pick up fantasy in the future. So if you guys have any fantasy recs for me, definitely leave those below because hopefully I can read them in the new year. I'm trying to read more fantasy next year. We'll see how that goes. Next, I read the Creature Feature Collection, which are Amazon originals. They are 6 short stories. So this is where I'm talking about technically you could kind of call it one book because they are so short. I don't know if they really count as like, oh yeah, I read 6 books in a day, but the books are like less than 50 pages, so I don't know. Short stories, whatever you want to call it. Once again, that vlog will be linked down below because these are such short stories. I'm not going to give like really reviews here. I'll just tell you guys my rating, but if you do want to get more of my thoughts on these, you can check out that vlog. I just spent the day reading these. We took a trip to Duncan. We went to the park and saw an alligator. We did some tier ranking. It was a fun time, but to give you guys just my rating for all of those. First, we had Ankle Snatcher by Grady Hendrix, which I gave 3 stars. Then we had Big Bad by Chandler Baker, which I also gave 3 stars. Then was In Bloom by Paul Tremblay, which I gave 2 stars. Then we had Best of Luck by Jason Mott, which I gave 4 stars. And then It Waits in the Woods by Josh Malerman, which I also gave 4 stars. And then last but not least, we had The Pram by Joe Hill, which was my favorite. I gave that one 5 stars. So go check out that video if you want to see my in-depth thoughts on that. Moving on, I read a few celebrity memoirs in November, and this wasn't planned at all. It just like so happened that all of my holds on these books came at the same time. So I read The Woman in Me by Britney Spears, Paris the Memoir by Paris Hilton, and Page Boy by Elliot Page. All of these have to do with a lot of different topics, but they also largely focus on the way that women are treated in Hollywood and in the media. Obviously, in Britney's story, she talks about her battle with her conservatorship, and it was really heartbreaking and very sad to read, and it's just so crazy to think that she went through this. Like, I can't imagine what that must be like to actually be a prisoner in like your own life. So I gave that one 5 stars. And then Paris, she talks about her time spent with like the troubled teen industry and getting sent to all these like reform schools, I guess you could call them, where they literally just torture and abuse children. And I was very interested to hear what she had to say about that in the book, because I did watch the documentary when it came out and she talked about that stuff, and she goes even more in depth in the book talking about specific things that would happen to her at these schools. It is absolutely horrific, so scary that the one particular school she went to is still up and running and still has children that who knows what they're doing to those children. So I gave Paris's Memoir 4 stars. And then Page Boy by Elliot Page obviously talks about his journey as a transgender man. It was very interesting. Also, things before he transitioned and coming to terms with identifying as a lesbian, and how that was seen in media and in Hollywood, and how he used to want to dress like more kind of male or like tomboy, but they would like make him wear a dress and heels and things to certain premieres. It was very, very interesting. The book, I see a lot of people don't like the fact that it's told in a non-linear format. You kind of jump around between different moments in Elliot's life. I didn't really mind that too much. It just kind of read as if each chapter is a separate story in his life. However, I did struggle with like some of the chapters, some of the stories that he told. I just struggled to find where they had a place within the rest of the story, but I also can't really judge because it's not my life and it's not my story to tell or my story to judge how it's told. So I ended up not giving this one a rating. I would recommend this if you are a really, really big fan of Elliot Page. I obviously am aware of him and I enjoy a lot of movies that he's in, but I wouldn't say that I follow him on social media, and I don't really keep up with him in popular media. So if you are someone that really does follow him and really look up to him and calls yourself like a true fan, then I would definitely recommend it. I'm sure a lot of this could have more meaning to somebody who I guess is a bigger fan of Elliot at the end of the day. For me, I'm not really. Although I do like him, I wouldn't call myself like a super fan. I don't know if I'm making any sense right now, but those are 3 celebrity memoirs that I read and enjoyed this month. I feel like I'm all over the place today. This is definitely like the quickest wrap up that I've ever done. And I guess that's because I read a lot of nonfiction, so it's not really like I have to explain the plot to you because it's a nonfiction book. Anyways, moving on to other nonfiction that is not celebrity related. I read 2 sort of like true crime nonfiction books. The first one was Dead Mountain, the true untold story of the Dyatlov Pass incident by Donnie Eicher. I thought this was really, really interesting. I gave it 4 stars. So if you guys haven't heard of the Dyatlov Pass incident, this is basically a group of students who went hiking in this mountain in Russia where it was like the middle of winter, so it was very snowy, very cold. They never returned from their trip, and when people went and searched for them, they found the tent had been ripped open from the inside. Their bodies were all kind of spread out in the wilderness, like they were in the tent and then they frantically ran from something because they were not dressed for cold weather, and cold water, I guess. But they had found different strange things on the bodies, like one of them died from like blunt force trauma to the head, one of them was missing a tongue. It was very, very interesting and very baffling at the time and still baffling today. So this guy, Donnie Eicher, he actually goes out and hikes that path, which I guess nobody before then had done, which I thought was really interesting. He includes a lot of photographs that I hadn't seen from the students that they took on the cameras that they had with them, which I thought was really interesting. And then he presents a new theory that he has researched and believes is a probable cause for what happened. And honestly, I feel like he is onto something. I think the way that he presented the story was really, really well done, and the way that he talked about, he would flip back and forth between the student's experience and then his experience hiking that same path. And I think his theory was presented in a really good way, and I think it's definitely plausible. I feel like that is the most likely thing that happened. It was very interesting as well to see him talk about other popular theories and why he thinks those aren't true, and the facts and research and basis for his assumptions. Is assumptions the right word? I don't know. But it was very, very interesting, very fascinating. If you have heard of that incident, or even if you haven't heard of it and you want to learn more, I would definitely recommend this. Then I read The Cold Vanish, Seeking the Missing in North America's Wilderness by John Billman. This one I thought was very interesting as well. If you guys are familiar with like the concept of missing 411, or just like the amount of people that go missing in national parks and the fact that there is no database to keep track of that. So this book primarily focuses on one missing person, Jacob Gray, who went missing in Olympic National Park. The author has met up with his father to kind of be there and help with the search efforts and just kind of be a witness to everything and write about Jacob's story. In between that, he also throws in other stories of people that have gone missing in national parks, people that have gone missing and never been found, people that have gone missing and have been found later and survived under extreme circumstances. It was all very, very fascinating to me, and I would have given this probably a 4-star, but in the end I didn't rate it because as I was reading more about the book and more reviews about the book, it seems that a lot of Jacob's really close friends have come forward and said that the way that the author portrayed Jacob and told his story was not accurate to real life. Obviously, I didn't know him, so I'm going to trust that his close friends are truthful and they know the real story probably better than a lot of us. So I didn't rate it for that reason, because I feel like it's important to pay attention to the people that were close to the victim and what they truly feel about this story. And they say that it's not good and it's not accurate. So I want to respect that, and that's why I didn't give this book a rating, but I did find it interesting. A lot of the different stories that he talked about, I don't know, I just think the whole missing 411, like people going missing, people vanishing in national parks is so fascinating, so I really enjoyed reading about it, but at the end of the day, I am not giving it a rating. And the last nonfiction that I read for November was How to Break Up With Your Phone by Catherine Price. This is kind of written in like a 30-day format. She gives you like a plan for 30 days to break up with your phone. The first half, she talks specifically about different statistics as far as phone usage goes and the way that apps are designed to be addictive, the way that our phone is designed to be addictive. Obviously, I'm sure a lot of us know a lot of those stats by now, but it was still very interesting to read, and it's just very, I don't know what the right word to say is. Very interesting and very appalling at times how normalized it is. So I really enjoyed that first half. The second half is when she goes into this 30-day period and she gives you a different task to do each day in order to break up with your phone. As somebody who tries not to use their phone a lot, I have done a lot of the things that she has already mentioned, so it wasn't anything absolutely new or groundbreaking for me to walk away with, but maybe somebody who has absolutely never tried to stop using their phone before, then I would recommend this. Also, maybe somebody from the older generation, because a lot of it is like kind of step by step, like how to go into your settings and do this, and how to do this, and how to download the app for this. When I feel like a lot of younger people, we could figure that stuff out, you know? Or she's like recommending to download apps for things that your phone already tracks. So if you are a little bit older, or maybe you don't know everything about how to work a phone, but you want to stop using your phone as much, then I would still recommend this. She had some interesting things to say, but overall I didn't have a very big takeaway, so I ended up giving this one no rating as well. And lastly, I read 3 other fiction books that don't particularly have a category that they go into, so we're just going to talk about them. I read The Drowning Kind by Jennifer McMahon, which is a horror book that apparently I've forgotten the plot of. Hang on. This girl, her sister dies in a swimming pool, and so she goes out to her house to like piece together things. And then we also have a timeline from the past of this woman wishing for a baby with this like water that is supposed to be magic. Can you tell I read this at the beginning of the month and I don't know anything about it anymore? This was my second book by Jennifer McMahon, and I felt the exact same way as I did with the first book that I read by her. I gave it 2 stars. It was so slow, and I don't understand. There are so many good ratings for this book, like 4 or 5 stars, majority of the ratings, and I just don't understand why, because to me it just dragged. Like, it progressed so slowly that I was not connected to the characters in either storyline, or when I was reading one timeline and actually starting to get invested in it and really interested, then the chapter would end and it would flip back to the other timeline and I would like have to get reinvested over and over again, and I just truly did not care at the end of the day. So I gave this one 2 stars. I'm really sorry if you loved it, but it just wasn't for me. Also, I felt the same way, like I said, as I felt the first time I read one of Jennifer McMahon's books, where I know it's horror and it's classified as horror, but it doesn't feel like horror at all. So, I don't know. I think I have, what is it called? Children on the Hill or something? That one I still have on my TBR. That's by the same author. I still am going to read that at some point, but I'm not very inclined to pick it up anytime soon because the first 2 from her have been a flop. Speaking of flops, I then read The End of Alice by A.M. Holmes. This one I was really excited to read because it is supposed to be dark and disturbing and just absolutely brutal and so horrific, which it was, but not in a good way. I don't know. So this story is told from the point of view of a man in prison. He is a pedophile. He is in prison for, you know, pedophile things. And he starts kind of having like a pen pal with this younger woman outside of prison, obviously. But I think she's like 19 or something. She's relatively young. And she now has like, what is the word? Just pedophile tendencies, and she is preying on young boys now. So we get a lot of descriptions from her journey hunting for a certain boy and his past stories that he did with younger women. It is absolutely disgusting, sick and twisted, but not in a good way. And I love absolutely sick and twisted things. Like Tampa by Alyssa Nutting has to do with a lot of the same subject matter, but that one was a 5-star for me. The End of Alice I'm giving 1 star because I just don't understand what the point was. I will say A.M. Holmes is a very talented writer. I will probably pick up at least one more of her books in the future, just to see how I feel about her writing with a different story. But as far as The End of Alice, I don't know. I just didn't really enjoy it. When I was reading this, once I got past like the opening, probably introductory, like 50 first pages of a book, and you get into the story, I was actually really invested, very interested in everything that was going on. But the longer the book went on, the more that my interest dropped, and I just got to this point where I was like, I don't know what the point of this is. We also, like, the whole time we are hearing from this man's point of view, we know that he had like this special girl that was Alice, and something happened with her, and that's kind of like a deep secret that obviously we're gonna get revealed. But then I feel like the reveal, I don't know, the way that the buildup was not equal to what the reveal actually was. It kind of just didn't deliver what I thought it was going to deliver. And I finished the book and I was like, what was the point of that? And I put it down and I was just like almost upset that I had read it because I just didn't like it. Like I said though, I am a fan of very dark and disturbing things, so it wasn't necessarily that I didn't like it because of what the subject matter was. It was just because of the subject matter in here paired with a sort of pointless story to me. I just don't really know how to explain it, but moving on, that one was a flop for me. And my last book of November was To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini. This is a sci-fi book. It is almost 900 pages, so it was a task for me. Let me think about where to start with the plot because so many things obviously happened in the span of 900 pages that I don't know what to tell you guys what the plot was. How about we consult the book? Okay. Kira, I know her name is Kira. During a routine survey mission on an uncolonized planet, Kira finds an alien relic. At first she's delighted, but elation turns to terror when the ancient dust around her begins to move. As war erupts among the stars, Kira is launched into a galaxy-spanning odyssey of discovery and transformation. First contact isn't at all what she imagined, and events push her to the very limits of what it means to be human. While Kira faces her own horrors, Earth and its colonies stand upon the brink of annihilation. Now Kira might be humanity's greatest and final hope. Okay, so that's good because that tells me what I can talk about and what I can't talk about. So as it says in the synopsis, this is a first contact. So the alien relic that she finds is like the first alien relic that they found in a very, very long time, and they only ever found one other alien relic like the human species has. So when she finds this one, something happens to her and it launches them into this crazy space war. A lot of different alien species are introduced. It was very, very, very interesting. There were a lot of different characters that we meet along the way. I gave this one 3 stars. My biggest thing was the length of it. There were so many parts like in the middle where it felt like you were just reading the same type of scene over and over and over again. We also have a lot of Kira's dream sequences in here, which first of all, I'm not a very big fan of dream sequences in books to begin with, but there were so many of them in here that it made me even less of a fan. Also a lot of like the battle or like fighting scenes, like I feel like after a while it just got repetitive in that like middle chunk. Then towards the end where the resolution was coming and we were finally wrapping up the story, I thought it was very interesting. I really liked the way things went for Kira and what happened with her at the end and her friends and everything like that. I thought the end was really well. I just feel like if you could cut out probably 200 pages from the middle and still tell the same story and still, you know, get the point across. Overall though, I thought it was really interesting. I enjoyed a lot of the actual like science elements to it and a lot of the different technologies that they have in this world. I really like the concept of the ship mines. Also, it took me halfway through this book to realize that they have a freaking glossary at the end. So I'll tell you what a ship mine is, just because I thought that was one of my favorite parts about the different like concept that they had in here. So a ship mine is the somatic transcendence of humanity, brains removed from bodies, placed in a growth matrix, and bathed with nutrients to induce tissue expansion and synaptic formation. Ship mines are the result of confluence of factors: human desire to push their intellect to the limit, the failure to develop true AI, the increasing size of spaceships, and the destructive potential of any spacefaring vessel. Having a single person, a single mind to oversee the many operations of a ship was appealing. However, no unaugmented brain was capable of handling the amount of sensory information a full-size spaceship produced. The larger the vessel, the larger the brain needed. Ship minds are some of the most brilliant individuals humanity has produced, also in cases some of the most disturbed. The growth process is difficult and severe psychiatric side effects have been noted. It is theorized that ship minds, both on and off ships, are responsible for directing far more of the daily affairs of humans than any but the most paranoid suspect. But while their means and methods may sometimes be opaque, their desires are no different than those of any other living creature, to live long and prosper. So it's basically like a human mind that they have done things to, and then it just runs the ship. I don't know. I just thought it was really interesting. I also thought it was really nice. Just the different like appendixes at the end of this book. Obviously you have the glossary, which I just showed you. We have this one, which is like, oh, hello. We have this appendix, which is supposed to be like a textbook excerpt explaining how they like travel through space. This one, Ship-Based Combat in Space, is a transcription of a lecture at the Naval Academy, just how they train their cadets to fight in space. And then at the very end, which I thought was really cool, we have the timeline. So starting from the year 1700 going up to when the events of the book take place, which is 2257. It just talks about humans developing like space technology and bringing us up to date with the events that happened in this book. I don't know, I thought the appendixes were very, very interesting. Overall, I think I said I gave it 3 stars just because that middle section sort of dragged a bit, but the beginning, the end, a lot of the different concepts that were talked about in here, I really, really enjoyed. So overall, at the end of the day, I would recommend it if you're a sci-fi fan. Just know that the middle might drag a little bit. Anyway, with all that being said, those are the 18 things that I read in November. Like I said, it was a very weird month. I had a lot of things that I didn't rate, a lot of things that I rated low. Really, the big winners for me this month were The Pram from the Creature Feature Collection and A Court of Thorns and Roses, which I never expected. But it was a weird reading month. I didn't have a lot of winners, which I'm a little bit sad about, but maybe December will be better. But with all of that being said, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I will see you guys next time.